Hey guys, so with the release of part 2 events for the Worldwide Download Celebration of 2023, we got a couple new hard fights added to the fray in terms of like hardest events in the game and stuff like that, you know, with the new Divine Wrath and Mortal Will event, and then, you know, a new stage for the Dismal Future Red Zone. So what I wanted to do in today's video is look at some of the hardest fights in the game and kind of rank them. If we look here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I have 9 fights here. So, you know, so close to 10. But let's go ahead and, you know, kind of give you the pre-basis for how I determine the difficulty of the fight. So all fights are being considered on the level of a no item run, and all fights are also being considered with the sort of best team possible for said event. So if a category mission for an event is hard, that is not considered. We are just talking purely based on the like I said, the overall difficulty, the stats of the boss and stuff like that. This is not going to be limited into, like, you know, the special pose mission for Cell Max or anything like that. But let's go ahead and get started with one honorable mention. And this one is more of a gimmicky fight, but it's just kind of funny to think about, right? And that is the Extreme Z area for LR Krillin. Now, this isn't a hard fight. They just force you to use units that aren't on the leader skill for the team. So it's really kind of just a coin flip. So, you know, I'm not going to really get into the description on this one, but I'm sure y'all know, if you've played this, exactly what I'm talking about, where you just get stuck with units that suck and you're relying on like stuns and seals to win. So this one's just kind of a meme. Don't take it too serious. So let's go ahead and get into the first fight on the list. So the first fight I have on the list is the Cell Max fight. Now, what makes this fight difficult to me is the fact that the first two phases, you can see here, like, the HP pool for him is pretty high, but that attack pool is not high. Like a 220,000 super, 378,000 super, just not a lot this boss is doing. And then in phase 2, he has an AoE. And so where the difficulty comes from to me for this fight is the fact that, you know, especially if you're doing, like, you know, like I mentioned earlier with the category missions, if you're using a unit on like a good team that has the buff damage, like somebody like Piccolo, or you think about like an artificial life form like the Gammas or something like that, they're going to do way more damage to these first two phases than somebody like AGL Captain Ginyu as well, because they have like the, you know, the event buff against Cell Max. So it makes these first two phases here that we're looking at super easy. And then you just get to this Cell Max and it's like, whoa, like, I mean, you can see here like 1.8 million on a super. That's like really high, right? And he can do two per turn or something like that with a 6 cooldown. Not much, right? And obviously, you know, when we come from the context of a no item run, we have right here, this right here is the bane of any no item run. Like, very similar to how this is in Legends. It's kind of the same idea to how it is in Dokkan, right? Like, locking the ability to switch characters, like, and we're not here to talk about Legends, but I'm just like kind of giving the idea of like character locking is kind of just like the bane of these gacha games, right? Because let's just say you have like somebody like, I don't know, the GT duo, the Boo duo, you put them in slot 1, but they're really designed to be a slot 2 unit so they can have their highest possible defensive output from their super stuff, like with their supers, right? And when you can't do that and you put a unit that doesn't have like a crazy good defensive gimmick in slot 1, it just leads to a lot of problems, right? Like, you think about a unit like the Boo duo, if you're not in their standby, they're not tanking the Cell Max super because they don't have a defensive gimmick, right? They don't. Like, the GT duo can at least have damage reduction, but 50% damage reduction, even on this, like, depending on your defensive number, there's a good chance you're just getting one shot by a 2 million super, even with that damage reduction, right? It's just, it's not enough, and that's what makes this fight kind of tough, right? And really, it's just this at this point, just like locking character switching is really what gets tough, right? So, Cell Max I have here at the, not the number 1 spot, but we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, like accent. Oh, all hell's breaking loose. Hold on. All right, I went crazy trying to count the tabs, but we're back. The next fight I have on the list is the Metal Cooler Core. Now, the Metal Cooler Core, as you can see, has a staggering 1 billion HP in the first phase, when can also do 644,000 on supers, but with the kind of the caveat to that is that you can lower his attack, and you're just really not, like, you know, it potentially be like, it could be bad, right? But nothing too crazy, right? Like, you'll be okay. Like, obviously can't inflict him with the debuffs other than the attack lowering and stuff like that, but really the second phase here is kind of where things get tough, right? Because 58 million is still a lot, and he has a damn hard hitting super, right? I guess the beauty of this one though is that it can only happen once, but he does raise his attack by 30%. So what you are kind of looking for is your slot 1 units to take this super, the ones that are designated to be your tank and stuff like that. But the problem is, especially when units do this, right? Like this effect right here is super annoying because you could still potentially take a ton of damage just from normals, right? So like imagine the super does like 400k, right? And your defense just isn't all the way up yet or anything like that, and you're not taking the double digits on normals. You could go 100k, 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 you're dead, right? Because like, you know, we're going under the impression that most of the best teams in the game right now are kind of like in that high 700, low 800,000 HP range right now. Depending on how you want to run it, unless if you're going like full LRs, is closer to that, but more of like, I feel like the magic number, especially if you're in like my perspective, where a lot of like the newer units are 55%, you're going to be seeing like that, you know, 700,000 HP range is about average. So, you know, you take 400k on a super, you take 3 normals, you're just dead. So that is where this one kind of does get tricky. And, you know, the typing is good because like the GT duo has type advantage on these guys. You have somebody like LR Blue Gogeta who can come in and just light this up. But this fight is still not a pushover, and you can absolutely get caught. And I think it's worthy of putting it in this spot. The good thing about this fight is that he does not have the ability to lock you. So, you know, compared to what Cell Max can do, I guess the kind of the caveat to being locked though is that, you know, he does have a chance of sealing super attack to 60% on somebody. So like imagine your GT duo or your Boo duo gets sealed, and funny we keep mentioning them, but imagine that unit gets sealed, they can't raise their defense the way you'd properly want them to, and then things become a little bit of a mess. So let's move into the next fight I have on my list. Coming in at the next spot, the third spot on this list, we have Sin Shenron. So Sin Shenron is kind of like baby Omega. It's still super tough if you use a bad team, but if you use, you know, like I said, from the gauge of using like the best team, you run like Battle of Fate, Earthbred Fighters and stuff like that, you're not going to have as much trouble as you would. And this boss being physical also makes it for an easier time. The only thing it kind of does that can be like mildly annoying is that it makes Trunks and Vegeta a little more susceptible to damage, but you can see he still doesn't hit as hard as the Metal Cooler Core, but it's just everything else that he is doing. It's this right here, right? It's the AoE. Like this is such, this like mechanic in general is always just such a mess, because like this is, you know, these are hitting, like 480,000 is a lot on an AoE, right? And especially when it can hit all of the units. And, you know, the common thing with hard fights in this game is they can get you before you can raise your defense, right? That's something that I keep harping on. And like when a unit is sealed, you can't get your defense. When a unit has an AoE, you can't get your defense. And what makes this one an Omega, we'll be talking about him later, it makes this one tough is the fact that he has 2 phases of this, right? And so it's like, say you want to bring like, let's just like play it out in theory, right? Like you just know that this Sin is physical. So you're like, okay, I'm going to bring STR units. You're going to bring, you know, maybe that STR Piccolo to link up with Orange Piccolo. You're going to bring LR Gogeta Blue and stuff like that. You're going to be in a bit of a pickle in this spot, or someone like LR Cooler, but you're going to be in a pickle in this spot because he still has an AoE damage that's going to hit pretty hard, and a super that hits hard as well. Like 1.1 million on a super is no joke, right? And, you know, you have this type disadvantage in phase 2, so that makes getting to phase 3 all the more difficult because you have like to deal with that direct type disadvantage. So you have to try and hide your STR units and stuff like that, and overall in all, it just makes for a bit of a hard experience, if you will. So I have Sin at this spot. Maybe you could move him a little bit higher up the list, but in my opinion, I think that the rest of the fights on this list are just a tad bit harder. Now, like this going forward, like the top 5 hard fights in the game, you can kind of move these around like almost all of the way. Like I'd say like the top 2, in my opinion, right now are pretty set in stone, at least in terms of them being 1 and 2, and then you want to mismatch, but like the top 5, they're all pretty close. So number 5, I have Broly, this red zone. Now you might disagree with this, and that's completely okay, but to me, it's still just this phase right here is so hard to deal with, right? An AoE super is just like as unfair as it gets, right? Because, you know, there is the off chance that you can just completely tank a normal, but this right here, this is tough, right? Now, I guess the one thing you can say now is maybe you can move this down below Sin, because there are units now that have like, after the update, like a unit like Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta is okay in here. Super Saiyan 4 Goku, Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta, any unit that has a super counter, like, or nullification, right? All of these units can do that in here. So that is kind of where things get tough, but like, you can't go into this final phase and be like, oh, it's just a complete and utter joke, right? Like this guy can do two supers, you know, he can hit the wrong unit in slot 3 or something. And it's like, if you're not like a perfectly like built up tank or anything like that, there's still a very, very good chance that you could take a big super from this guy. And 50 million HP is not a joke either. It takes a bit to get through. But again, this guy has been power crept out a little bit, but in my opinion, that AoE super alone is enough to move him over Sin Shenron, because, you know, Sin, it's like, it's just AoE normals. And, you know, if you get proper placement with the, you know, with like your dodging, and not your dodging, but like your guarding and stuff like that, and you've actually had a little bit of time to stack, you'll be okay. But an AoE super is tough, because if you have a unit that doesn't have like a super counter, a super nullification, there's a good chance you're just dead, right? Like even like the LR Gods, for example, the unit that is just designed to completely just like destroy this and slap it all around and stuff like that, they can get caught in this spot, right? Unless they do like a triple super, you have like Super Saiyan 4 Goku's Oob standby, getting like that extra defense. You've had like, you know, a triple super, you've nullified one of the the attack and stuff like that, there's a good chance you're taking 700 to 800k, 600, 700k on that AoE from the super, and there's just not much you can do about it. So again, I'd say Broly, just that AoE super alone and the ability, and one thing I didn't talk about either is this right here. Disables evasion, right? Like, and that's in every phase, right? So you can't dodge him. That's something I just forgot to mention, right? I don't know how I didn't, but that's what makes this fight tough, right? Like you can't dodge. And a lot of the units, their defensive gimmick is they dodge, right? You think about Tech Kale, or not Tech Kale. You think about Tech Caulifla. You think about the UI Gokus, for example. You think about the new blue Vegito and stuff like that. Like, their whole kind of gimmick defensively, aside from just their guarding and their stacking ability, is that if you want to throw them in slot 1, especially at the beginning of the fight, they have that guard. So that's where things kind of get a little bit tricky, right? But, you know, that's enough of the kind of like easier, not even easier, but like the ones that aren't going to be as difficult to, like, especially no item and stuff like that. Like, you could probably get this one within 1 to 2 tries almost every time you play with the best team. We're going to be moving to ones that you can definitely just get caught right away and you just straight up lose. So let's go ahead and get into the number 4 fight. So coming in at number 4, I have the new Zamasu and Goku Black Red Zone stage. In my opinion, this one is not harder than the Goku Black Red Zone, and it's because this stage right here, it hits hard, right? 1.25 on a super is very hard, but it doesn't hit as hard as Goku Black, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, let me just pull this up. Yeah, so it's almost like 200,000 less on that super. So that's why, in my opinion, this one is a little bit easier than the Goku Black Red Zone stage. So you guys know probably what the final 2 are at this point, but this one is tricky, definitely tricky, because, you know, right here, he has healing, he can't be stunned, so no matter what, you have to eat those heals, and you have to find a way to out-damage Zamasu. Like, you have to kind of find a way. It's like in the Divine Wrath Immortal Will fight, it's kind of the same philosophy, right? Where you need to just out damage the heals that he does. So he's either healing for 8 million, he's healing for 4 million. You need to make sure that the turn you net more damage than he can heal up, right? And that's where things get tricky, because, you know, you can see right here he's got 40 million HP and 60% damage reduction, right? Or 64, and also a 1.25 million super attack, and has healing. And, you know, we go into this turn right here where this guy's got, you know, 1.5 million on a super attack and then 60 million HP and even more damage reduction. It's doing 9 attacks a turn and whatnot and stuff like that. You know, we have you know, it can't inflict any debuffs. We have his super is sealing you. He's raising attack on their super. He can double super. Like, this is a tough fight. But in my opinion, why this one, and, you know, kind of everything that I've said about this one is very similar to the next fight. So we'll just go into the next fight, and that's the Goku Black Red Zone. What makes this one more difficult to me is that, you know, both the supers, they hit harder, right? So this one is 1.57, and then this one is 1.68. So the supers hit harder. He raises attack and defense on the super. You know, in the first phase, he just hits harder, and that's where things get tough, right? And he raises defense on that super, so then he becomes even more tanky and stuff like that. And it's just like this fight feels more like a coin flip turn 1, where if you have bad rotations or you just the first hit of the fight is a super, you're just done, right? And that's, in my opinion, what makes this fight tougher than the Goku Black and Zamasu one. Now, again, it's very similar to stuff like this. Like, you know, if we look at the super attacks on this one, it just raises his attack, but on this one, it raises his defense, and on this one, he's also raising his attack and defense and stuff like that. He only gets 1 super per turn, but that super hits like a Mack truck, 1.68 and stuff like that. And you're just kind of looking for Orange Piccolo to nullify that, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Just getting lucky, and this is just a tough fight, right? So, you know, basically everything that I said about the Zamasu one is kind of just reigns true for the Goku Black one. So, you know, basically, just to recap the list before we get into the final 2, we have the Cell Max fight at this spot. So let me make sure I get this right this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at number 8, I have the Cell Max fight. At number 7, I have the Metal Cooler Core fight. At number 6, I have Sin Shenron. Number 5, I have Broly. At number 4, I have Goku Black and Zamasu. And at number 3, I have the Goku Black Red Zone. So right after this, we'll get into 1 and 2. Okay, so before we get into the number 1 and number 2 spot, I just want to make sure, if you guys have not already, that if you enjoyed today's list and you enjoy content like this, to please leave a like and subscribe if you are new around here. It greatly helps out the channel and motivates me to make more content just like this. And, you know, that's it. Let's go ahead and get into number 1 and number 2. So coming in at number 2, I have the Omega Shenron fight. Now, this one might be tricky to grasp for global players because you don't have this fight yet, right? And it's also like, you know, you kind of see it in the distance. You're like, oh my God, like, how am I supposed to beat this fight? We've been hearing about how it's the hardest fight since, you know, July or August or whenever it came out, right? And in my opinion, I think the fight above this is just a little bit harder based on the turn 1 output. But this fight, it's a doozy, right? it's a long fight, and it's kind of like, you know, when this fight came out, and because, you know, the typing especially is like, you know, we do have what's the word? We have like the Boo duo stocks, excuse me. Since they're physical and they have that type advantage, we're able to see like it go up because, you know, you're able to get that standby out. You're basically seeing the Spirit Bomb every single time you go into this fight. You're stacking up a decent bit, and, you know, he's not getting absolutely just blitzed by this one, right? And that's kind of like where things get tough. But like you guys can see right here, he has a 1.4 million super, which is not as high as the other supers on the list, but it's this right here, right? He's got not the damage reduction, but 10 attacks per turn and AoEs per turn, 3 AoEs. And look at that AoE damage, right? That's tough. Like, it's hard to get around that, but the counter side to that is that you have a lot of time in the beginning where, you know, you can stun or you can lower the attack of this guy. He has a chance to evade, reduces damage from every typing except for int, which is always going to be difficult to deal with just because, like, you know, there's a lot of good STR units in the game right now. Obviously, AGL with like Vegito and stuff like that, you're at that type disadvantage. Some unit like Zamasu. He has a super attack effect of raising defense for 1 turn, stuns the enemy, conceal. It's just either one of those two. But again, being able to lower his attack is nice. But again, it's not enough to the point where it's like really tough, because what this guy does in phase 1 is this right here. And again, being able to not dodge makes fights a whole lot tougher. Why do you think the Broly fight is harder than this fight that came out after it, this fight that came out after it, and this fight that came after it, and this one? I'm kidding, but why do you think? It's this. It's disable. This word right here, dodge. Dodge is the most important mechanic for new content, right? For hard content. Being able to just, you can't take damage if you dodge, and that's when you disable dodge, that's what makes it tough, right? So again, this guy's doing, you know, this fight is already tough as is with 40 million HP, you know, 9 attacks, 2 AoEs, the chance to super, and then you just multiply everything, you know, by 1.5 and stuff like that, right? Because now we're at, you know, 75 million, you have more AoE damage, more AoEs, more attacks per turn, a harder hitting super, you know, nullifies everything, you know, it lowers your defense and stuff like that and hits normal. So it's like, you think about a fight that lowers the defense, and you think about a fight like a legendary Vegeta event where Vegeta hits you with a super for 400k and then lowers your defense and does 90k per normal, right? And that was like back when it was hard. I mean, obviously that event is way power crept, but you get the idea. So if you haven't figured out number 1, it should be fairly obvious at this point, but it's this new kind of gimmick fight against Blue Vegito. Now, this is where things are interesting, right? Let's 1.564 on a super, right? Basically this, but he can do it twice. And he raises his attack on it by 50%. Like, his attack is 680,000. This guy's attack is 550,000. This guy's attack is 500,000. This guy's got 680,000 attack, and he raises it by 50% on a super, and he can super twice. Like, and 1.5 million. So it hits harder. Does it hit harder than Omega Super? It does. Yeah, it hits harder than Omega Super. He can do it twice. There's a lower cooldown on it, but you have to know that you can lower his attack. But like I said, why do I think the Goku Black Super or Red Zone is harder than the Goku Black and Zamasu fight? Because of turn 1. Turn 1, this guy is eviscerating like virtually everything, and you know, you really are kind of like want to be cornered into running like an extreme class team because of just like, you know, someone like this. If you're on JP, you can run somebody like Omega. You have Zamasu, who is still getting lit up by those supers. The AGL Zamasu, like, you still need to stack him up and get him built up and stuff like that. But to me, like, the reason like you could argue that Omega is harder than this one is just because this fight feels like a little gimmicky, and it was like, it wasn't really designed to be done from a no item perspective, because you were able to use 4 items. So if you have 8 turns of damage reduction, you'll be okay. But again, I'm coming from the perspective of, you know, this is from the no item, and even with the best team, right? So you just kind of look at everything this guy does. 70% damage reduction, nearly 70,000, or nearly nearly 700,000 attack, nearly 100 million HP, a 1.5 million super attack that he can do twice and raise his attack on those supers. It's just tough, man. Even when you lower his attack, you can still get caught by a super pretty hard. So, you know, with all that being said, that is my rankings for the hardest fights in the game right now. Again, we'll just kind of quickly recap everything that I have. I have 8 fights listed here, and I'll give you the final list and we can get out of here. So at number 8, I have the first iteration of the Cell Max fight, not the Red Zone. At number 7, I have the Metal Cooler Core Red Zone. At number 6, I have Sin Shenron. the Shadow Dragon event fight, not the red zone. At number 5, I have the Full Power Broly red zone. At number 4, I have the Goku Black and Zamasu red zone. At number 3, I have the Goku Black Super Saiyan Rose red zone. At number 2, I have Birth of the Shadow Dragons Omega Shenron. And at number 1, I have Divine Wrath Immortal Will Blue Vegito. So let me know what you guys think of this list down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I'm out of my mind putting this guy at number 1? I don't know. I feel like this fight is like just so tough from a no item run perspective. So thank you guys for watching. As I said before we got into number 2 and number 1, leave a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe if you are new. Let me know what you think of the list, and I'll catch you guys next time.